Christian Heroes Then and Now. David Livingstone, Africa's Trailblazer, by Janet and Geoff Benge. Chapter 18. Servant of Humanity. David Livingstone's 3 African helpers, Susie Chuma and Jacob Wainwright, were faced with a problem. Their friend was dead, and they didn't know what to do with his body. In the years they had been with David, they had come to understand he was considered a great man in his homeland, and they wondered if it was right to bury him in a tiny village on the shore of a lake deep in the heart of Africa. David would probably not have cared, but his 3 loyal helpers decided that somehow they would get his body back to Great Britain. It was no small task, but they promised one another they would do whatever was necessary to make it happen. The first thing the 3 men did was cut David's body open and remove all his internal organs, including his heart, which they buried under a mulva tree. Next, they covered his body with salt and left it to dry in the sun for 2 weeks. They guarded his body day and night to make sure no wild animals tried to eat it. Once the body was dry, they wrapped it in tree bark and then sewed it inside a sheath of sailcloth. They lashed the sheath to a long pole and sealed it all with tar. Now the body was airtight and ready to be carried to the coast. Although the journey was over 1,000 miles, never once did the 3 Africans consider abandoning David Livingstone's body. They carried it through war zones, swamps, and jungles. They even met an expedition of white men headed inland who tried to convince them it was too dangerous to continue on, and they should bury David's body where they were, but they would not. As they told one African who asked, "This is a very, very big man." Africans had many superstitions about carrying dead bodies, and at one stage the men were attacked and harassed. After that, they rewrapped David's body and told everyone it was a large bolt of cloth they were taking to market. When they reached the coast 8 months later, they delivered the body to the British authorities, who transported it to England aboard the HMS Vulture. Since Jacob Wainwright spoke better English than Susie and Chuma, and could also read and write the language, he was chosen to accompany David's body on its final journey. Once he reached London, an autopsy was carried out to ensure that it was in fact the body of Dr. David Livingstone. The broken bones in his upper left arm from his encounter with the lion were ample proof of his identity. Now that everyone was assured it was the body of David Livingstone, April 18, 1874 was declared a day of national mourning throughout the British Isles. There was not a student or factory worker anywhere in the country who did not know that Britain's greatest hero was being buried that day. 11.5 months after he had died, David Livingstone was finally laid to rest during a huge funeral service at Westminster Abbey. Mourners overflowed the church into the streets outside. 8 pallbearers carried the coffin. Among them were Thomas Steele, now Sir Thomas Steele, and Cotton Oswell, 2 friends from David's early expeditions. Dr. Kirk, who had helped David explore the Zambezi River, Henry Stanley, the last white man to see David alive, and Jacob Wainwright, who had helped transport David's body from the interior back to England. Robert Moffat, David's father-in-law, sat in the front row, along with the Livingstone children. A huge slab of black marble was placed on David Livingstone's grave. On it were inscribed some words taken from a letter David had written to a friend a year before he died. David had been writing about his most passionate subject, ending slavery. The words read, "All I can say in my solitude is may Heaven's rich blessings come down on everyone, American, English, Turk, who will help to heal this open sore of the world. A month after the funeral, the United Free Church of Scotland decided to establish a mission station in Central Africa in honor of David's work there. The mission was to be built on the edge of Lake Nyassa, and it would be called Livingstonia. £10,000 was quickly raised from Scottish churches, and Livingstonia soon consisted of a mission, a school, an industrial settlement, and a hospital. In 1913, the Royal Geographical Society held a special meeting to commemorate David Livingstone's birth in Scotland 100 years earlier. Lord Curzon, president of the society, summed up David Livingstone's life perhaps better than anyone else. In the course of his wonderful career, Livingstone served 3 masters. As a missionary, he was the sincere and zealous servant of God. As an explorer, he was the indefatigable servant of science. As a denouncer of the slave trade, he was the fiery servant of humanity.